Ngowi TV, informed economists and business perspective.
Not employed, but I'm just working there as an informal person. First of all, in our group here, we have discussed some contradictions in definition, the way we define and the actual life at where these people are working is a bit contradicting. And we contradict ourselves because we are not really staying with them to understand the exact status of the people who are called informal. But also, most of the industries in Tanzania, more than 85% are actually informal because they don't possess more than 5 people. And so they are busy, but they are termed as informal because they are in that level. Tanzanian economy, according to Professor Semboye here, is actually is mainly informal because it doesn't grow and it doesn't reproduce itself. So we ourselves within Tanzania, we call ourselves, some are formal, some are informal, but in fact, the outside world is looking at us, our economy is almost informal because it doesn't grow, it doesn't reproduce. And most of the machingas at Kariakoo are actually busy, but you can see them today and tomorrow you can't see them because they are just surviving. So how can you formalize them if you don't see them tomorrow? When somebody amepata chakula yake, ameshaishia, amepata nauli, ameenda, alafu akiishiwa anarudi, anapata chake, how can you make them form? But then in the beginning, before we started the group, I thought I should share. I sold newspapers in this city. I was a newspaper vendor. Some of you might have met me selling newspapers when I finished my A-level. And then I was surprised that am I illegal? Because I was making money. At one time I could sell more than 500 newspapers. So I had money. I could give some lunch offers to some of my friends. Was I illegal? But also, if I want to register a company, and I was told, if you want to register, you need a filing fee, 66,000 shillings. And that is 66,000 shillings. It is survival of an informal person, maybe for several weeks, to buy some maharage and some food and some chicha, you stay. So should I register this little company, or should I survive? And then to register itself, you need 326,000 shillings to register a company. Even an NGO, you call it limited by guarantee. So how can I, in my 500,000 capital, opt to go and register a company and become formal? I opt to become informal, and most of them remain on that side. So I thought, let us now go to an advocacy point from this meeting and say we need to advocate for the informal sector to stay and prepare the formal people, but we must create a conducive environment for each one who is engaged in an informal activity so that he or she aspires to become formal with motivation, encouragement, and not discouragement. My company, which was informal, I was washing cars in Kibaha. It was smashed by TANROADS because they're expanding the road. And so it was more than 3 million invested there. Now I don't have that activity. The young people who are working there, now they're just struggling in town to stay. I'm not sure how many are becoming now smugglers. And I'm not sure if they remain safely or faithfully working in town. So I think we must be very serious to make sure this sector is working to help the people, but not be smuggled.
Looking at the unemployment and the employment angle. The power of the informal sector in Tanzania, as my colleague said, we can say generally, Tanzania, we are all informal. Because if you are talking about agriculture, over 80% of Tanzanians are engaged in agriculture. So for the context of Tanzania, can we say that agriculture is formal? Because most of our, we call them peasants, most of our peasants, when you go to the village and ask a peasant, what is your work? For example, for us who are always doing research in villages, there is always a variable asking for employment or occupation. When you ask him or her, what is your occupation? What will he or she tell you? Sinakazi. Yes, the peasant will tell you sinakazi. He cannot tell you that ninakazi, I'm farming. No way. So we cannot say that is employment, because by the definition of employment, if you go to ILO, they will tell you is an activity, or is an activity that if you get paid. If you are working and get paid, that is an employment. So if you are farming, you are 2 acres or 1 acre for your survival, for your family consumption, for household consumption, then that is more than informal. And if you look at the integrated labor force survey that was done in 2014 by the National Bureau of Statistics, they say that for people who are aged 15 and above, that is the working class, 65.2% of them are working in agriculture, and 23.3% are working in informal sector. So if you say agriculture is informal, and you have the informal sector, 65 plus 23, you get 88.5%, which means you can say 88.5% of activities in Tanzania are informal. So you can see, if you are talking about every 100 people, 83 are in the informal, so you can see the power of informal sector in Tanzania. So, as Professor Ngoy said, we cannot force the informal to become formal, because, as we said, when you become formal, the TRA will be there. To register a company, you see the hurdles, the fees, and to establish a business in Tanzania, I think is more difficult than other countries. There are a lot of procedures, a lot of stages you have to go, you have to pass, okay? One of my colleagues is now establishing what do you call the industries for packing this water, but he has spent a lot of money. If you go to this environment people, the impact, the NEMKI, you have to pay the consultants like 7 million, you pay NEMKI like 10 million, yet to get the certificate, you will spend not less than 30 million. So if I am informal, I want to become formal, I want to pack, this water is flowing freely from, for example, I'm coming from Kilimanjaro, the water is flowing freely from the mountain. So I may decide to set a small factory to pack this, but how can I do that? How can I become formal? So it is very difficult to become formal in Tanzania. So what to do? The government, as they said earlier, we should go with this formal sector and make sure that the government benefits and the informal sector benefits. Okay? There should be a win-win situation. We saw that there was several attempts to make it formal. We had the Machinga complex. I don't understand what was the aim of the Machinga complex. Was it to make the Machingas formal or not? Because now it is there. A lot of money has been spent to build the building. Now it is only there. You may think they are keeping one of them, Sungura. There are people who should be doing business there, but there is no business. Okay? So I think the government should think in another way. Or maybe we say the government should also think informal. They should stop thinking formal about the informal sector. They should also be thinking informal. So to make sure that we go parallel. Okay? You may be surprised that in Tanzania we're saying that there is employment creation, while at the same time there is unemployment creation. Because if you look at the graph of employment, it is rising. We say that the employment is growing. But at the same time, if you look at the graph of unemployment, it is also growing. So I expected that if the employment is growing, the unemployment rate should be going down. They should be opposite, but they are going in the same direction. So I think there is a problem, and we should look into that perspective. Thank you.
In terms of everybody discussed about no poverty, but also the informal sector is very customer-centric, and that's a benefit. They know exactly what the customer needs, and that's why you find them coming up in places that you least expect. For example, if you go to Kibukoni, you have people selling vegetables. It's because they've determined there's a need for that. So in terms of recommendation, we feel like somebody considered group formation, but in our experience, group formations fail. Many groups there's no sustainability. So what we think, we should have a membership. If we have an informal sector, for example, Boda Boda, they have a membership, they are in an association. They pay a membership fee, and that should be collected, part of it should contribute to the taxes, rather than forcing them to be formal. Also, the cost involved in terms of being formal, for example, EFD machines, receipts, they take away from what you get as income, as everybody has discussed. This is your livelihood. So the best way is to have like a formalization of how to collect in form of membership. So for this group, segment the taxation and get it from the membership. So let everybody be a member of an association particular to that industry. And then we are looking also at a way, because we are looking at it informal in the villages. So if you're in the village, then what should be the process? There's so many issues involved in communication, infrastructure. So again, there could be a membership through their local government, or it could be a membership through stakeholders. So that's one of the recommendations we had. But we also had another opinion that we should formalize the informal sector because it will help us to grow into medium income. Somebody did that argument, but it wasn't very favorable here, so we didn't get to discuss it.
I am a PhD student at the University of Dar es Salaam currently. Yeah, going around the topic, and as per the table we have been here also trying to go around. There are issues which we have come up with them. These could include the point of awareness among the players of the sector, of the sectors, including the informal sector and the formal sector. In fact, Tanzania could achieve much of what has been covered in the topic if at all we could come up with the understanding of the following things. We have the government, we have the formal sector, we have the informal sector. These are things which, if you could put them together, it is like having a vehicle and having the drivers. The formal sector and the informal sector are the drivers of the vehicle itself. And actually they want to go a higher speed than the vehicle itself which they are driving, which is the thing very difficult to observe it. So the major problem which we must build up in order to reach the achievement which we think we can be, let us make the players with enough knowledge. We have the government officers, we have the players themselves in the informal sector, the entrepreneurs who are working and are aware of different rules which are imposed by their government. We have the officers in the government who are working sometimes without knowing what to regulate to the entrepreneurs. As a result, we are mixing, we are conflicting, as we have been hearing that the definition itself is a conflicting one. So what I would advise much and much, let us employ enough education to all the players. The vehicle itself, which is the government, the informal sector who are working there, and those who are operating in the informal sector. They have to be given enough education especially the education of patriotic on their national economic, so that they can work knowing what are they going to pursue, what are they supposed to fulfill, what are their obligations to meet the policies, the national objectives, and other issues which are related to the economic factor. That's what I could contribute with my tale. Thank you.
My simple question maybe to presenters or would be on data. Somebody spoke of data. We have a statistician and the presenters talk something about data. And when you see the world now is going with data to have informed decision. Now, is there any data on informal sector, any research conducted or something? Or should we do it to see how informal sector can grow and make us a bigger economy as we talk of Tanzania and Rwanda? For example, in China, when they are coming up economically, they are soon will be superpowers. Soon they will be superpowers. My question, you see now, what they are talking about is that China is actually reducing poverty to its people. The more people are graduating from poverty, the higher the country is coming up economically. But in Tanzania now, do we have information, do we have data? When you see, for example, if I can give an example on agriculture, we are actually, every country surrounding us is in need of maize or some kind of food from Tanzania. But the government now is forced to ban any kind of maize exportation because we are not producing enough for us to consume. That's a lot of data. I think that if we, as a civil society, government, every stakeholder, embark on data. As a country, we need this kind of food, maybe maize, for example. Then we should export at this level. We need actually exporting. We need to export everything we can produce. That means we can grow informal sector on the side of agriculturals and agricultural, some kind of traders to export their food and banning them from exporting so that we can get enough. So I think my question is on data. I would like to hear maybe from one of our presenters on data about that. How can we use data to grow informal sector? Thank you.
About data, well, the informal economy, the discussion and discourse about the informal sector, there isn't so much data specifically on the landscape or the economy itself, but there is data on specific kind of issues within the sector. For instance, there is data around employment, there is data around informal food sector, there is data around informal cross-border trade, there is data around informal on agriculture, but there isn't data exactly depicting the landscape itself. For instance, the TRA had a survey in 2007 exactly looking at how the informal sector could be taxed, better ways and best ways to tax the informal sector, looking at issues around the potential of the sector itself. Now, data becomes a problem when the diversity of the sector goes beyond the limits of the perception or the definition of most of the stakeholders. Now, right now, this is a call exactly to stakeholders to do more scrutiny, to do more assessments and studies on specifically looking at the size, for instance, the size of the informal economy, the magnitude of the economy. Looking at the important critical issues that would, in one way or the other, contribute to the approaches, the strategies that the government puts in place to formalize, for instance, to formalize the informal sector. So it's very important for the government and other stakeholders to kind of increase the studies, increase the assessments of this specific sector. But about the data, it's not very much specifically on the whole issue. Thank you.
My name is Salaam. I'm a project management specialist, and I'm happy to work a little bit extensively with the informal sector in one way or another. I have only 3 observations from what others have already spoken. What can be the recommendations? We have all seen that we all appreciate that the informal sector has contribution to the economy, and therefore the recommendation we provide is the government should appreciate the existence of the informal economy and its contribution. And what we say is we should move from what is currently a phenomenon that an informal sector is ad hoc. It has to be appreciated and recognized as an official sector. That's recommendation number one. Number two, the fact that we say majority of formal businesses, we recognize that they start as informal. Maybe the government should make some more efforts to see how do they categorize the stages of how an informal business can graduate to become formal. And with that, we have our fine, and the basic recommendation we give is, let us look around our national education curriculum, whereby the previous speakers have indicated that some of the challenges informal sector face include fear of paperwork. That's one thing. You have taxing effects, another thing, and then business management skills, and especially record keeping. Now, how do we go around this? If our national education curriculum is adjusted to reflect and make sure that every citizen from kindergarten, they start learning and knowing that informal sector is also a contributing factor to the economy. And here is where we will unfold what we have a note. Many people think that economy is only driven by employment. I think many people have spoken about the number of people, employees, to make it formal or informal. Rather, it should be at every citizen's knowledge that you can contribute to the economy even if you are not employed and getting paid salaries. That's why we say education system should embed entrepreneurship from the very, very early stage, that everyone is aware that contributing to the economy, you really don't need to be employed. Rather, you need to be working. Thank you.
I think we basically touched on two things, but I think one thing we need to remember is these definitions tend to be some of the points. So for example, if you use the definition of 5 people or 10 people or a number of people, you could have 2 tech geeks who are starting a startup. I don't know how many employees Uber has now, but it's probably less than 2. So the number of people being employed or working on a project does not have any bearing on the scale, income, or productivity of the company, especially at the time where technology is such an important thing. So I think one of the things we have to remember is that. So there are 2 things we spoke on this table. One is, I think first we ought to do away with the notion that the informal sector is not paying taxes. Yes, they might not be paying income tax, corporate tax, but everybody is paying taxes indirectly. So if you want to tax this informal sector, perhaps you should be focusing on the indirect tax, things like VAT, where everybody pays the tax on consumption. So whether you're registered or not, you're paying these taxes. And we see the government trying to put efforts into this. The second thing I think we ought to be doing is to try and help these informal businesses, and companies scale up. As much as we want them to remain formal, as much as the government wants to come to their ground, to their terms, it will be very difficult to scale if you cannot formalize them. Things like getting financing, things like getting technology, things like getting subsidies. All these things require formal channels to execute. So I still think that there is need to keep trying to at least pick some of the informal players and try to help them scale so that they can formalize.
Yes, I think it is time that we inform the government that there is a lot of misuse of the amount of money that is collected. For example, can we afford every 5 years to pay members of parliament 250 million shillings? You're paying, by the time he leaves, nearly $1 billion shillings. I don't think we can afford it. Number two, the industrialization policy needs rethinking. We are in fact going backwards. The industries of the future are going to be knowledge-based, not heavy, they're going to be very light. Thirdly, I think it's very necessary to make use of the comparative advantage we have. And not to boast in the name of climate change, sustainable development, that the future of Tanzania depends on irrigation. The reality is we simply don't have that much water. And it's not because you've cut down trees and you have misused the land. It is because we are not facing reality. And the biggest reality is that it is not policies, it is to treat human beings like human beings. Tanzania's population is increasing, but have you noticed the amount of land that is going to for elephants and for wildlife and for tourism? How many people actually benefit from that? We got to rethink everything. Thank you.
The National Bureau of Statistics, they are doing some surveys in census. The current one, the industrial survey, the industrial census, has an information about that. Okay, so that's one. But also, there was not census but surveys. There's integrated labor surveys. They cover that sector. I hope there is one informal sector surveys. Just made, it is not it's not irregular, but at least they have current information about that one. But also, I think there are a number of studies done by different universities. My problem here is that this data is not shared. That's the biggest problem. And then I think since we have the civil societies, it is our responsibility also to try to organize ourselves and then to monitor the behavior of this sector. I'll give you a very interesting picture here. There is data if you go to Carrefour now, which has to be collected through different things. Through the observations. What you see in Carrefour, with the participation of these informal entrepreneurs, on one hand, politically, the formal sector has recognized that informal sector politically. But that is an informal sector which is for survival, very transitory. When you say very transitory, because it is operating in areas where legally they are not accepted. They are operating in areas where other people have got business licenses and they are paying their duties. The scale of operation, of course, is 1 to 2, 3 people. That's what they call by